Welcome to another episode of the Captains and Coaches podcast. I am your host, Tex McQuilkin, and today I traveled out to Phoenix, Arizona to sit down with Brett Bartholomew, the author of Conscious Coaching and founder of artofcoaching.com. In this episode, we talk about motivation psychology, how a coach can communicate in the dreaded film room, and how an athlete can take that criticism/feedback. And then we get into the anti-hero, what it means to take on that persona of villain as an athlete and how that can lead to success. Awesome conversation and sit down with Brett. This episode is brought to you by Art of Coaching. Head to artofcoaching.com and check out all the live events. I've had the fortunate opportunity to attend the apprenticeship and the speaker school. The apprenticeship is one of the most valuable experiences that I've had as a leader. If you are looking to improve your social agility, your ability to connect and manage people, as well as understand the power dynamics and where you rank in your business or within your team, this is for you. You are put in situations to think on your feet and then come up with strategies to come out alive, so when you go to the real world, you are prepared to manage those expectations, experiences, and steer the conversation. Miscommunications can be costly. The apprenticeship is there to empower your communication, social agility, and ability to think on your feet. Head to artofcoaching.com, check out all the live events, and then get 10% off with the code TEX10, TEX, and the number 10. That's going to get you 10% off live events. Highly recommend the apprenticeship. There's a couple already on the board for 2025. Without further ado, let's get into some fun social agility, talk about anti-heroes, and all this fun stuff with Brett Bartholomew. Ready, and break.
Hey, hi.
Okay, action. Welcome to another episode of the Captains and Coaches podcast. We are live on the scene in Arizona at the headquarters of the Art of Coaching.
I'm captain. He's coach. Welcome to Captains and Coaches.
Yes, I have a special guest, Brett Bartholomew. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here in my office sweating with you.
I know. It's 117. We're in record heat in Arizona.
Indian summer, bud.
I don't know what that means.
Prolonged summer. Past the time when it should be summer, but it's still summer. Getting ready to run the retreat, so it knew to be 110 degrees, 50 degrees Celsius roundabout for those of you in the international community.
Mm-hmm. And what are we doing here this weekend?
What we're doing, Tex, is when I went out on my own as an entrepreneur, there was nothing but kind of douchebag masterminds. You either had to want a 10x your business, have a private jet and a platinum blonde wife, and want to shoot guns all day and backflip off of caves in Belize, or you had to have some business where you were in one area, like a gym owner or a real estate agent doing like $1 million a year. And at the time I was like, where's just simple, no nonsense things that entrepreneurs, whether they're trying to make their first buck or first million, can kind of get together and share ideas. Like, hey, I got a course I want to release, or I'm thinking about building a compound on my, my property, or hey, I could just use some guidance with marketing. So we started a program called the Coalition, which is a non-douchey mastermind. At least we try to make it such. And within that 4 to 6 month window when we run it, which is usually twice a year, we pay for a whole retreat. So we get hardworking, overthinking, hard on themselves people to come together, have some fun, have some heads down time and some recreation. So we're going to go do a wipeout style obstacle course on Lake Pleasant. We're going to cook a lot of food. We're going to throw mini footballs so we all feel like really good athletes. We're going to jump in pools, and we're going to do some campfires.
A great time. Team building.
Team building. And hopefully you teach me about hair, because mine is atrocious and yours is wavy as always.
We'll end the show with my routine.
Yeah, products. Roisel.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many people have been sliding on my DMs asking about my skin and hair routine.
It's the side button for me.
Okay. We're going to be discussing a lot of feedback and something you create. You work hard this weekend, and then you're going to be wrestling them to make sure they get a good look at it. There's parallels to this and how a coach would lead a team.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to take the opportunity to discuss with you new coaches to this or coaches that have been leading teams at any level, they got to deliver bad news.
Yep.
So that's what I want to circle around is not only the perspective of a coach delivering feedback, so how they deliver feedback to an athlete, and then how we'll go into a little captain's corner, speaking to the 14 to 18 to 22-year-old, how they should be receiving that feedback.
Yeah.
Not as attack, how they can redirect that into performance and development.
Yeah.
So that's the circle of this conversation, and I feel it's appropriate to lead with the coach, and where they don't get defensive, right, or they don't feel they lose the kid. So that's where I want to start is feedback delivering from the coach, and you are the coach of coaches, the art of coaching here. So imagine now I'll set a scenario, a scene for us to discuss, and we've all been there, and I'm sweating just thinking about it, or it could be the lights, film room, post game. We got to show up on Saturdays following a tough loss, and we got to watch the film.
Yeah. So this is very close to what my master's degree was motor learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would talk about augmented feedback, especially amidst constraints, and knowledge of performance and knowledge of results, right? Knowledge of like performance being like, all right, we're giving feedback in the moment. And I know we're doing the film room thing, but just contextualizing this in a moment. So if somebody's doing a clean or they're performing a drill, whatever that is, giving that feedback immediately, right? So then that's knowledge of performance. Here's how this was. Here's what we can do. Knowledge of results is post session. Okay, I've watched the whole thing now. I've kind of been quiet. I'm simplifying this for the context. But now let's look at overall how we did. And we can do that in general. Like you came out for our facilitator course, you get knowledge of performance, right? So intermediate feedback, hey, try this, or you did that, or excellent job here. And then overall assessment, right? That knowledge of results. And so film room, I remember when I worked at Southern Illinois having to do that right after a game. You know, the next day we'd be in there and offense would lift, defense would run, flip flop, and then you're in there watching film. And yeah, that can always be very interesting because you're going to have athletes. People, again, forget that these people are individuals first or people first. So there are people, to your point, that are going to take it as a critique because this is what they care about. And the closer you are to something, the more personal it feels. And you see that with coaches too. There's somebody listening right now that if somebody taught them a new drill, whether it was in the weight room or the sporting context, I'm all ears. Feed me, tool in the toolbox. But if you go tell them about their tone of voice or something about interpersonal communication, that's an attack. You know, they feel like that's not the same thing as giving me a new drill or new insight into this and that. So, yeah, what do you want to tackle specifically on the film room? And then we'll go from there.
I feel we should start with tact. They know they made the mistake.
Yeah.
So if we're focusing on the knowledge of results, the kid knows what's coming. That play happened in the third quarter.
Yep.
How are we going to approach this? The old ball coach way, or is there a better way that we can improve that for next week, next game?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple options. So let's say somebody is a little bit more defensive or self-conscious, and let's call this person Dante. I mean, I might be like, Dante, tell me what you saw there, right? I'm going to have him put it in his words first because that gives me an invitation to start framing things in language that might be a little bit less threatening to him. And I'm not talking about like snowflake threatening, just I want to see if he even acknowledges the mistake.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, well, I did this and that, but, you know, to my defense, I thought he was going to do this. Okay. I'm not making a generalized assumption here, but that's a little bit of defensiveness, not taking ownership and agency. So what I would do in that case is I might be like, Dante, first of all, don't worry about saying that. I get it. Let's just focus on what you feel like you could have done better. Well, I should have covered this gap, or I should have done this, or maybe I should have, you know, taken a stronger crossover step. Great. That's a point. And another thing, if you allow me to, is think about if you would have done X, Y, and Z instead. What do you think that would have led to? So you can turn it into a coaching moment. If somebody's defensive, the bottom line is the principle is you want to make them feel like they have some power, right? And I'm not talking about negative manipulation. You just need to allow them to have some autonomy within that. Then it feels like they're not being like corrected or made fun of, which a lot of them can feel like that in front of the room. You're inviting them to like coach yourself, you know, and I'm going to guide you through that. So that's one scenario. Or you can just say, hey, Dante, what do you see there? Coach, flat out, blew the tackle. Okay, why? Well, I took the wrong step. Head wasn't in it.
Went over the block.
So I think it's really important for anybody listening to this to at least scenario plan 4 ways. One, you got somebody very defensive. Okay? Somebody defensive, they're going to start contextualizing it. They're going to start hedging it. Well, to my defense, well, I thought he was going to do this. Well, whatever. So let's say we got a defensive persona. Another one's just going to be a sin eater. They're going to be like, I sucked. I sucked. I didn't do that well.
Are they going to articulate that or just
I mean,
eat
they,
it?
they can. I mean, that's why I'm just kind of, there's so many options and degrees of freedom here of how a human being is going to respond. I'm just trying to give some in a vacuum. So somebody could say that, right? And just be like, because a sin eater can be something to your point that they never voice it, or they just beat themselves up. They kind of self-flagellate verbally. They're like, I sucked. I was scared. I missed that. I'm worthless, or whatever they end up. And you're like, no. First of all, mistake wasn't that bad because you can see in 3 more plays here, you did the same thing and you did it well, or just, well, let's not focus on that. What do you think you could have done better? Because you're going to be met with this exam. You've got to kind of rebuild that person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think coaches are really lazy when they're like, I don't have time for that. BS. You absolutely do. The key is to first be aware of it and then have some things that you can do to address it. So we have somebody that's a little bit defensive. That's one tactic. Somebody that is going to immediately beat themselves up. That's another tactic. Give me another example that you might think an athlete might do. They might just say, I didn't think I did anything wrong. Or what else?
Yeah. They're low self-awareness, so then they don't see it as a mistake.
Yeah, or they could just say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, coach, I don't know. Okay, well, here's what I see, and then you start laying it out. I see that you took this approach, that approach. Would you agree? Let's say the person's just super difficult. I don't know. Sure, whatever. Okay, well, now this becomes something.
Shut down.
Shut down, yeah. Now you might not have time to address it right then. So you kind of move on with this session and you find that athlete for a one-to-one meeting later on.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise people like that, and this isn't just athletes, it's coaching coaches. We'll have coaches that do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I might have to realize, okay, there's many things that could go on here. They don't want to be addressed publicly. They want to, they kind of want to have a little, you just need to kind of isolate that. Otherwise, you as a natural born fixer and somebody that wants to coach can end up spending 30 minutes trying to get this person to open up. Because I know that really bugged me. If somebody doesn't actually show awareness and they don't seem like they want to be part of the process, I won't let them go. I mean, like, no, we're going to sit here all day until you sit here and talk about it. And then I'm like, okay, isolate, and then reintegrate. Mm-hmm. So you have sometimes people just have to have that private meeting and realize that not everybody's going to address it, express it, and want to know about it. So there's a couple scenarios that people could use right there.
Yeah, I had a flashback to my high school football game film in our, it was either sophomore or JV quarterback. He I don't know if he got defensive, but he fumbled the ball. It was raining, and then of course, like JV, we get the shit footballs. So then basically, coach is like yelling at him for fumbling the ball, and he's like, "Coach, I can't grip the ball."
Yeah,
grip the ball. I'll grip your ass.
Yeah,
and like yelled at him right
yeah,
there.
Exactly. But I think people just have to realize there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of and like if you just listen to them, because how do I know what approach to take? Well, pay attention. This is tennis. You flip something out there, you see how they respond. You come back. At first, like the first few minutes of a conversation are just research. Mm-hmm. It's a scientific method. Okay, you seem to be like this. You don't always voice it. I'm going to form a hypothesis. I'm going to try this method to get you open up, give you a little bit of power, or give you some space to see if you can kind of talk it through, or I'm just going to come at it. There's also sessions where, listen, to play devil's advocate, there's also times where you're not going to be able to go in depth. You're going to have to say, Rodney, here's what you did here. Here's what it looks like to me. You might feel different. Let's talk about it after film room. We've got to break this down quick, and then I'll spend some extra time with you. Mm-hmm. There are some times where you do have to just kind of nip it in the bud right there. They might not have a full understanding of it. You might not get to do a detailed application of it, but you should circle back. So I think if a coach sits there and says, none of these work for me, you're a lazy ass coach. Because people like to say that stuff. They're like, well, no, that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work. That wouldn't work. Okay, then give me your scenario. But by and large, people are going to feel like, hey, I either want to be a part of the process, I don't want to be embarrassed in front of people, or I want it direct. And if none of those are the case, right, well, then let's figure it out. You need to go to that athlete a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's great feedback. So I want to take a step back to the knowledge of performance. So now sometimes during game, like we got to deliver fast feedback.
Yep.
So that way we can move on.
Yep.
So then that may come fast. It may go hard, and the kids may take it the wrong way, like in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
So, like, how do we frame that? Do we take that approach? Do we give them fast, hard feedback in practice to prepare them for the game? or do we reshape how we deliver feedback in the heat of the moment?
First thing I do is if I'm coaching people, just like I do in my business or in this context, I always let them know what to expect of me. So, like, if somebody's on my team, I'm like, hey guys, we got a game today. If I'm coaching you on the sideline, just know I'm going to be direct. I'm going to be brief. I respect the hell out of all of you, but I'm going to try to isolate that message, lock it in because we've got a game to play, right? Don't get sensitive. If you hear something you don't like, we'll explain it more in depth after the game. But like, let people know how to receive you. You know what I mean? Like I do this even when I speak to people that I just spoke to 100 people. None of them know me. In the first 3 seconds, I say, hey, everybody, thanks so much for your time. Couple things. I'm direct, but it always comes from a place of respect. All right. I'm flawed and I want to help. So if I say something and it seems brazen or it seems, this, just know that I'm trying to not waste your time. I'll always elaborate on anything that you need. So a lot of it is just anchoring and framing. If somebody's coming to the sideline, or like I boxed competitively in college. Let's talk about this because we always talk about field sports. I had 1 minute in between rounds, right? And I'm getting punched and I can't breathe and I'm getting told to stand up even though I want to sit down. We all do because my coach was like, mental toughness. I'm like, well, physiologically, this just does not make sense, but like all good. But what I always hated is, I think the best example of poor knowledge of performance is I'm in the middle of the round. I'm thinking of combinations. I'm trying to use feints and movement, and I'm watching with everybody's screaming, and my coach is like, stick the jab, win. You know what I mean? Like you said, stick the jab 5 times. I've thrown a jab. I don't understand if that's working. So now I come back to the corner. It'd be like, when are you telling me to stick the jab? Watch his left shoulder. His shoulder drops when he gets to throw that cross, then stick the jab. Okay, now I have an association. So if you're going to be brief, you need to lean on anchoring and associations. So you got to choose a sport depending on what specific thing you want. Hey, if it's tennis, hey, remember when he has to do that crossover, he's not as quick. So if you can hit him with that backhand, watch a crossover and then try to slam it home or shallow. Okay. So what I would always tell coaches is, one, be specific. If you're going to be brief, you also have to be specific. And the metaphor here is think about your athletes. They're driving down the interstate 75 miles an hour. Okay. That's the speed limit. It's appropriate. They see a billboard. They have 3 to 4 seconds to process what's on that billboard. What's the message? Your feedback to them in between rounds, in between matches, in between plays, better be a billboard. So when he drops right hand, throw the jab. When you see them go in motion, fill the A gap. When you do, whatever that is. But coaches, I think a lot of times, can I be honest on here? Most coaches don't know what the hell they're talking about succinctly enough. Like I went to a lot of NFL training camps when I was in that space. And I saw a lot of really decorated coaches yelling shit like faster feet, go harder, do that, good. What does any of that mean? You know what I mean? What does any of that mean? Or good job using fast feet on that drill, or that's exactly what we taught you to do. Nice job filling that. But be specific. Hey, when you drop back, the way that you did this or did with your hips, do that again. Reinforce things. You got to act like, and I'm not going to mince my words here, you're treating a dog or you're reinforcing an animal. There's a great article by this behavioral economist that talks about how training Shamu helped her in her marriage. And it was all about like not just getting on my husband when he didn't do things, but reinforcing the small things he did along. Very Pavlovian. Thanks, Tex, for taking the time to put your laundry in the hamper. Hey, that day when you made my toast and my coffee for me, I really appreciated that. I send small signals along the way of what I want. You condition that athlete to know.
Yeah.
Shamu, billboards, timing, succinctness.
Time out. Let's take a quick break from this episode to talk training and the Old Bull program. This is a classic strength and character development program that is flexible and efficient, tailored for the busy leader, the busy professional. If you are managing or leading teams, this program is for you. You're going to develop physically, mentally, socially, and emotionally. Each block, I target a character trait for you to focus on that is negative and will eat your team alive. This could be anger. This could be envy. It could be a fixed mindset. So we hold the mirror up. We take these challenges on daily with huddles and information integration for you to bring into the training. I have 2 required days, split push and pull, that are heavy. The rest of the week is up to you for a choose your own adventure style with different workouts ranging from 60 minutes all the way down to 20. This is a character try a 7-day free trial by clicking the link in the show notes for the program Old Bull and give it a ride. Let's get back to the show. Ready? And break. What happens, I guess, how can a coach, this is awareness, but how can a coach be aware if they put too much on there and the paralysis by analysis occurs?
Yeah. Best thing you can do as a coach, and you should do, every single coach, with the acknowledgement of their staff and their athletes, of course, should record themselves, And so, hey guys, I'm trying to get better feedback. I'm wearing a mic today because I want to hear the things I tell you in between plays. We have mic'd up on all these NFL shows. We have all, if I would have owned, like at one point I owned a gym in LA, I was going to open up a place in Atlanta. They would know that twice a month there's cameras on the floor, and we're going to sit down as a staff and assess body language. We're going to listen for cues. I'm going to hear how many times I hear a bullshit good job, not good job keeping your back flat, good job snapping through with the hips, excellent work with your grip width, whatever that is. Excuse me. But coaches need to, if these athletes are getting assessed daily, and here was the whole part of our business, why aren't coaches? Coaches don't get trained. They don't. A bunch of former athletes become sport coaches. They don't go to coaching clinics where they're working on cueing. They don't go to coaching clinics where they're working on communication and conflict resolution. They don't go to any of that. They read drills and they read from, what did Bill Parcells say? And what did Urban Meyer say? And what kind of offense did Tom Osborne run? And is there a drill that Brady used with this and whatever? And it's like, no, that's not coaching. That's training. And it was the same thing with strength coaches. Oh, I'm going to a clinic. Oh yeah, weightlifting, speed, agility. Are you actually going to coach? And that's why, as you know, at our clinics, people get recorded. They get recorded so they can be like, oh my God, I didn't know I said that. I didn't know I looked like that. So for coaches to actually have some expectations of yourself.
Get their own game film.
Get your own game film and tell people, hey, from an ethical duty, I just want to, and I don't want to hear shit. Because people will be like, well, our administration. Right. You're going to tell your administration, you're going to go up to your HR and your administration and say, I'm trying to get feedback on how to be a better professional. Can you give me the verbiage I need or the paperwork I need signed to have my athletes know that I'm going to be recording myself during the game, or that they may be picked up on ambient audio? Come on. The truth is people don't want to hear themselves and see themselves because it's easier to say the athlete doesn't get it. And that's laziness. That's not accountability. So I think a lot of coaches are kind of full of shit. I think they like sitting there and saying that they're a coach, but when all of a sudden it's pointed at them. And Bill Belichick, and by the way, Nick Saban both talked about this on their own. This was named after our company, so obviously they stole it for us. They did Art of Coaching on HBO. And Saban said, the one thing I learned from you, Bill, was it's all about the athlete and relating to them. I can tell them what to do. Your guys, you can't. They've got to you've got to win them over. You've got to have that buy-in. Hashtag conscious coaching. Right. Yeah. And so you get buy-in when your coaches know that, okay, I'm not the only one, and then imagine if you invited them to do that. If you said, hey guys, how do you perceive me when you hear this? Or what's my tone of voice like? Or my body language? They might be like, yeah, coach, I thought you were pissed. Oh, interesting. No, that's my face when I'm focused and I care a lot. So I think that's the main thing I really want coaches to take away so far is point it at yourself, know how you're doing, and invite feedback to be bi-directional.
That's awesome.
That knee slap was, did you hear that?
I did.
Emphasis.
It's good timing. Yeah, I like that component on accountability. So focusing again, we're still in the coach's mindset. We want to hold our team accountable,
Yeah.
but they're sin eaters. So anytime they frame accountability or making corrections on mistakes as failures.
Yeah.
I want to spend some time with shame as a motivator. So context to this question, as a lacrosse coach, we get a lot of dual sport athletes. So a lot of dudes coming from football to lacrosse, the spring sport. And then come game time or when the going gets tough, I work with a pretty empathetic staff and group. So we aim to build up and really get to know the guys. And some of them feel that they only respond to being MF'd as motivation. So put down, yelled at, kicked in the ass versus speaking to them and aiming to rise them up.
Okay. So the joking answer that I have to get out of my system right out of the bat, to be serious, because it's just part of who I am, is shame's a great motivator in the intimate part of your life sometimes. Date night, you got to shake things up. You can edit that out, but I want to keep that in there just because I like You're a friend. I like kind of making you squirm in your chair. The short answer is, of course, shame is not a long-term potent motivator. Okay. I want to take a devil's advocate approach on something, though. Nike came out with a commercial during the Olympics, voiced by Willem Dafoe. And we did a podcast episode on this. Did you hear it? Okay.
No.
If you allow me a brief aside, which directly answers this in a way that I think people will at least appreciate or feel strongly about, that they'll want to kill me. Willem Dafoe, typically cast as a villain. Guy knows who he is. Great villain. Green Goblin in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Very unique character, complex guy. And the ad starts off saying, "Am I a bad person? I'm single-minded. I'm selfish. I want to take yours and make it mine." And it shows LeBron James and Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and youth athletes and God, I almost said, I'm trying to think of the term. The adaptive athletes, shows a famous wrestler with no legs. People, it's clearly showing the more aggressive side of sport. The thing that we have all thought. Okay. Of course, I was raised, be a good sportsman, shake hands, all that. Fine. But if you don't think I ever walked into the boxing ring being like, I'm going to knock you out, I'm going to win this, you're crazy. My point is athletes have, just as people, have diverse inner voices, diverse inner experiences, things that are situationally deployed.
Mm-hmm.
And every tool, every tactic has an inherent virtue and vice. So, of course, shame can be awful and not a good thing to use. And it's got to be, if it is ever used, it's completely contextual on the relationship of that individual. I had an athlete that he wanted tough love sometimes, and that's fine. In small amounts, that's potent, but that's not sustainable. So I can sit there and be like, hey, you jacked that up. And frankly, I'm not going to take half-ass effort. Get back to it. And when you're done wasting my time, we'll be able to doing this. He's like, okay, coach, I see you. There's a multi-million-dollar athlete that's used to people kissing their butt. And I'm just letting him know I'm not going to do that. Later on, I tell him, I go, hey, I'm just giving you a kick in the butt. I love you, and I appreciate you. And he's like, I know, you tell it and you keep it real. And that's what I value out of you. So they need to know what to expect out of you. Everything has a place, and I'm only going to speak in ethical bounds. So if somebody wants to hear this and say that I'm saying it's okay to shame somebody and tell them they're worthless, and I'm clearly not saying that. What I'm saying is negative emotions, or what's typecasted as negative emotions, and things that can be seen as aggressive or assertive, can have a place in the right relationship with the right athlete. It has no place in youth sports. I'm not going to say that I'm a father. I'm not going to say this to my child, but I do have a child the other day that goes, Daddy, I'm going to hit that ball farther than the other boy. Right? He's just saying he's going to hit the ball far, and I'm like, Bronson, it's okay. Like, the other boy's going to hit it far too. He goes, I know, Daddy, but I just want to try. And I'm cool, dude. Like, hit it farther. You know what I mean? But celebrate when he hits it far too. That little boy did not mean he's better than the other boy.
Yeah.
He's having fun. Just like when he says, Daddy, I'm going to beat up the bad guy. Okay, beat him up. So you have to assess that athlete and that relationship and that context and all that. And for the record, kindness and loving people up and hugging them up and servant-based leadership is not all good either. When I lost a fight, I didn't want a hug. I didn't want to be told how amazing I am. Tell me what I did wrong and let me get back to work.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And this is where most people probably I'm not for them. Robert Greenleaf's original conception of servant leadership was this idea that if you take care of the person, everything else will take care of itself. In a multi-million-dollar organization, on a team, all of that. And Robert Greenleaf is a genius. He had many great aspects. There's many wonderful things about servant-based leadership, even though it's now been used to almost describe every behavior known to man, and it's very ambiguous, and they make it almost impossible to critique. But of course, that's not true. A coach can take care of every need. An employer can make sure their employees have retirement, can make sure they have a salary, they can make sure they have this, and that does not mean organizational goals are going to get uniformly met. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think that anything taken to an extreme, as most things in life, is not good. You can't just love them up and tell them they're great and participation trophy and say you're God's little flower and all this stuff. But of course, you can't shame somebody, make them feel worthless. So I think you've got to look broader. But if we did want to just contextualize it to shame as a universal source of influence, no, that's trash. It's not sustainable. And it can be very potent for people like Mike Tyson in certain parts of his life if you listen to a lot of that interview. But Cus D'Amato learned how to use other things. And I just think that that's what we're missing a little bit, Tex. You're my friend. I respect the hell out of you. Would you respect me if when we were doing something together, I didn't say, "Hey, man, that was shit effort"? Just like if I didn't say, "Tex, you really brought it, and I really appreciate the caring and thoughtfulness and attention to detail you." Don't you want me to tell you the truth
Well,
sometimes?
fine line between being a good teammate and being an asshole. So
Right.
if you don't tell me about my piss poor effort, then it's being an asshole.
Yeah, if you told me I mailed something in, I just went and spoke and I asked Jason Lyden, one of our facilitators, I'm like, how was that? I'm like, I'm running low on sleep. I am torn between a lot of things in my life. And I was fully present in that moment. You know, when you're running on 3 to 4 hours of sleep and you're all over the place, you like sometimes where a lack of sleep will impact me as latency periods when trying to come up with a term. I'm like, did I seem off or anyways? He's like, no, and I'd tell you. And I go to bed at night knowing that that man would tell me.
Hmm.
Okay. And he wouldn't tell me just to tell me. I don't need people to hold me to a perfectionistic standard. I need people to know, hey, Brett, like I've never once seen you make a mistake due to a lack of effort. That's what I want you to judge me on. Cause I'm also not somebody, and I'm sorry, I know I'm ranting here, but these are things that I get emotional about. I hate the quote, and we don't use the word hate a lot in our family, especially being the, a parent. But I do hate the quote, how you do anything is how you do everything. That's trash. I do not take out the garbage the way I make love to my wife. I did not engage with my math homework the same way that I care for my child. And somebody can sit there and say, I'm extrapolating. Am I? People wield that quote around
Hmm.
like it's an absolute. And I think there's too much absolutism in coaching. I think that you need to be a gray area coach. I'm biased. This is my next book. This is a lot of what I advocate for, but I do not think it is simple as light and dark, good and bad. Life and leadership are messy and a gray area. And you've got to find what works for you in your context.
Yeah, there's a lot of words that just when I hear another coach use them, it's just cringe a little bit.
Yeah.
So any form of absolute, never do that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I can think of about 10 times last season in which that we needed to do that.
And that's why I got really upset at the outrage. And I encourage anybody listening to this or watching this to go look at the outrage of that Nike commercial. Because there are people saying this makes you sport look abysmal. This is awful. The strongest reactions kind of hit home for a reason. I looked at that and I knew right away. Okay, they cast Willem Dafoe for this. They're showing imagery of dominant performances. And by the way, I've seen a million Nike ads of "We can do it." Plus size athletes waking up at 4 in the morning, going through something winded, people like me that are kind of broken down, trying to make it through a workout and inspirational messages. I don't need every commercial to be like a Folgers in your cup, sunshiny thing.
Hmm.
I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh my gosh, absolutely. I go in, if you were to contract me for a speaking event, I respect all the other speakers. I hope they do amazing. But I absolutely tell my wife, I'm going to go in there and smash this. That's just a me thing. That
Yeah.
is not me thinking that I'm better than it. That's a self-competition inner voice. And so I saw this and I think to be honest, I lost a friend over this. And he was an Olympic coach and he said, "What do you think of that ad?" I said, "I think that's the best Nike ad I've seen in 10 years because it's honest. It's an honest thing and I've coached over 500 professional athletes and a lot of division 1, division 2, division 3 athletes as well, youth athletes, advanced, and not one of them would sit here and tell you the truth that, no, I never have that attitude that I'm going to dominate this. I'm going to beat my opponent. It's situationally deployed, just roomed with 5-time gold medalists that
Hmm.
said you don't succeed in athletics without some aspect of that. And this other guy was like, no, I think it casts a poor message for you sport. I think it's not a sustainable fuel source. I'm like, well, that's not the ad, is it? And by the way, if one commercial ruins you sport, and if your kid's seeing that commercial, that doesn't say much. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, that I don't feel is shaming.
No, no, but we're
That
just talking about negative,
yeah.
because shaming can be a lot of things. You don't want to say, Jimmy, you're worthless, or Jimmy, you're the reason we lost. That's shaming, right? I don't, like I said at the beginning, I hedged all of this rant with that's not okay in my book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think that's okay. And if somebody feels like they need to be beat down by that, we need to explore a bigger issue.
Yeah.
We need to explore a bigger issue because that doesn't that leads to maladaptive responses and internalization of guilt and things that become cannibalistic.
So now sticking with that internalization, how do we differentiate internalizing drive and then inherent motivation? So internalization of those negative energies to push you along as far as it can,
Yep.
whether that's far or not long, and then an inherent motivation.
If I understand that like it correctly, what I think about here is is something chronic or short term.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if I think, I always just put myself in scenarios. I'm sure there was a time where I threw a bad pitch when I played baseball growing up, and I thought I lost it for my team. Okay, like I can own that for a while, and sometimes you're just going to have that inner voice, and you've got to deal with it. You know, I can go to the batting cage, or I can practice, I can do this, I can do that, but at some point, it's just got to like you've got to have alternative kind of prompts inside your head. So if we talk about short term versus chronic, now we're having a conversation of what constitutes chronic and what's short term. But I just think it is okay for people to periodically go to dark places where they're like, I I didn't do well. I'm worthless. I cost us a team, whatever. You're not going to block those things out. That's part of what's known as acceptance and commitment therapy, right? Acceptance and commitment therapy. And again, I'm not trying to overgeneralize. I'm trying to just keep this within the context of this conversation, is essentially recognizing that your brain is going to have a negativity bias. All right. That's what helped us survive. If I ate one bad berry, I'm dead. And there's a bigger cost benefit ratio than if I ate 5 of the right berries.
Mm-hmm.
So our brain is still evolved to kind of just think negatively. And there's an acceptance of that. When I had our son, and I don't know how many parents can relate to this, I thought of about every way that kid was going to die. I was like, I'm going to drop him when I go down the stairs. It was terrifying. And I just talked to another new parent who's a facilitator. He's like, all the time. You have dreams about it. All of a sudden, the stairs that you've walked down every day of your life, you now think, what if I trip and this child goes flying? And I remember talking to somebody about that had a therapy background, and they were like, yeah, these are things that are baked in us. You know, if you get success, how long is this going to last? Who's going to cancel me? Who's going to one day is somebody going to look at my text of an off-color joke that I told my friend, and then it's all going to come crumbling down. On the other end, if you haven't had success, you're like, am I ever going to make it? So our acceptance and commitment therapy is like, you're going to have thoughts that come through your head that are negative. Think of them as tourists. They're okay. An awful thought just came through my head. An awful thought just came through my head of I visualize my son doing this, or I visualize somebody taking something out of context, or somebody doing that, or my next book flopping. That's a natural thought. It's weird. I'm done with it. Not something's wrong with me. I'm worthless.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain is a better, and this is not my terminology, and I hope everybody contextualizes this as well. Your brain makes for a terrible, terrible master. It is a much better servant. If you let your brain just complete, and what I mean by this is if you take your thoughts too literally and like, oh, why am I thinking this? It's unnatural, it's slimy, it's negative, it's whatever. It's a thought. This thing is a thought generating machine. Millions of them come through every day. You're going to give credence to all of them. Think about all the awful things you've thought about. Think about the times you almost, like the bare naked ladies. I almost laughed at a funeral. Can't understand. Like somebody one time gave a eulogy I thought was hilarious. I wanted to blurt it because I knew that person well that had passed. I'm like, oh, if you only knew. There's all kinds of things we think about, we worry about, we project, we internalize. So acceptance and commitment therapy is the first type of therapy that I thought was realistic because it acknowledges the negativity bias, the weird things we think, and it tells you you're not messed up because you think them. Plenty of Olympians have thought, what if I fall and slip off the blocks? Plenty of people have thought about, what if I fart on stage? Congratulations, you're a functioning human, you're not broken.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's pervasive and people have continually damaging thoughts and all that, and by the way, there's hotlines for this. So if you're somebody that's dealing with depression or anything like that from somebody that has dealt with it, call and get help. Nothing's wrong with you, but it's good to have a conversation with somebody about this stuff. So I just think that if it's persistent, whatever that means, if it starts leading to thoughts of self-harm or it starts negatively impacting the people around you, those are your siren calls.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, sticking with that, there was one season where held a team meeting. It wasn't going as good as our talents could have let our season go. So team meeting, and then brought up fears. And so just went one by one. And then 70% of them were scared of getting injured.
Sure.
A lot of dual sport athletes. And then I essentially had to paint the picture, like all the warm-ups we do. everything that we're doing from my side of the ball and on the field, that's injury prevention.
Yeah.
The last thing I want you thinking about is injury. I want you going full speed that I know you're capable above, and effectively like go through this stuff versus being hesitant to the contact or the truly the opportunity to take the ball and be the dude.
Right. And to that point, Tex, there's also nothing wrong with walking people through worst case scenarios. I watched we did a podcast on this. I watched a father playing soft toss with his son the other day. And soft toss, you have that idea of, okay, I'm going to toss it up from the side, you're going to hit it. I think I'm practicing the swing. I think this is going to translate to the game. Parts of it maybe, but the reality is, let's say I have a kid that's dealing with tremendous anxiety. Specifically, let's say that maybe he gets nervous every time his girlfriend watches him or a parent watches him or whatever, right? And that dynamic might be multifaceted. Well, now, there's also nothing wrong with being like, okay, Jimmy, imagine the last 2 times. And again, this is contextual to the kid's age and whatever, right? But if the kid, let's say the kid's 15 years old, all right, buddy, let's imagine you had a bad game. You've struck out twice and Savannah's in the stands. I want you to imagine that. I want you to visualize that. Maybe I even put something in his line of sight that represents Savannah or something he or she is scared of. They've got to deal with that. This is how true transfer of training takes place.
Mm-hmm.
It's contextual interference. So we spend a lot of time trying to get people to not have these thoughts. That's valid. That's part of the strategy. That's smart. Everything you said, I absolutely agree with. But there's also something to be said of like, this is why people go, hey, 4th and 1, we're down by 5, final play. What are you going to do? And you've thrown 3 picks. You have to put people in scenarios that they're going to be in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know people are going to get anxious? Do we know some people have self-defeating attitudes? Do we know that there's going to be things in our environment that rattle us?
Mm-hmm.
Expose them to it. Exposure therapy is very potent, and people cease to be afraid of it. That's the way you ultimately make these things into a sustainable fuel source. You chase realism, not idealism, and if somebody can't handle that, then you adjust the ratio. Maybe a kid can't take much of that, kid being, a wide ranging term. And again, I'm not advocating for any of this of like, 5-year-olds and whatever. Although my son's 4, I'm like, buddy, sometimes it's not going to work out the way you want. And this is all you got. Let's just have fun.
Mm-hmm.
So does that make sense? It's okay to have it. Go.
Now, what if there's coaches that hide in confabulation? I'm preparing them for that moment by being an asshole.
Yeah. I mean, again, you can't give a one size fits all answer for everybody. There are going to be people that are going to abuse everything. This is like when we teach persuasion and influence, there are going to be people that weaponize that for malfeasance. I can't control that. Okay. Those people have to have agency, accountability, checks and balances, all that kind of stuff. But what I can tell you is not exposing people to certain scenarios and constraints doesn't help them because they're going to be exposed to it at some point. I'm just going to ask every coach to treat it like a budget. Okay. So do an audit. Ask yourself, how often are you using that method? How often are you using this method?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever those methods are, saying, okay, this guy says I should use some positive psychology, but I should also use some aspects of exposure therapy, which they're more related than you think. And then there's times where maybe, let's say somebody's like, my natural persona is aggression, and I've won 5 titles. It's like the water boy, that coach from the championship team is like, I can never argue with the champ. Great. If that works for you, cool. That's kind of like saying, hey, investing in this stock has provided great returns. Awesome. But we also know that you should diversify. So maybe just diversify. See, like, can you put 10% over here? Or are you half and half? Are you this and that? And so you just got to diversify your skill set, but diversifying it first starts with what are you doing? And this also goes into the stuff that we teach when people say, oh, I'm not going to think about all these communication tactics in real time. Think about them after. Think about them before. Like, so wait a minute. Are you arguing that you shouldn't be aware of these different tactics? You're arguing that you'd be better. You're not going to come to our course because there's all these different tactics and you don't think you're going to use them in real time. So you have no desire to build awareness or a level of unconscious competence and broaden that skill set. Sounds like you don't want to develop a skill, which sounds like you don't want to be a coach because communication is a skill that coaching is predicated on. How do I drop this mic?
You just throw it as hard as you can.
But wouldn't that be negative?
Unless it's not.
Is there a time to throw mics?
I'll pick you up. This is yin and the yang, the balance.
Yeah.
So I'm the type of person that replays conversations, practices what I said to kids, what decisions made in games, etc. So then that's the beauty of the course is you're you're dropped in it. You get up in front of the group. You fail fast.
Yeah.
And then you get to observe others. How would you take that?
Yeah.
What would you say in that handoff, that scenario? And it's fun.
It's skill development.
Yeah.
Right. It goes back to experiential learning, which is the core of skill development. So I need to have a concrete experience, whatever that is. I need to ask Vanessa out on a date. I need to try to apply that thing coach said. I need to try to do blank. So I have a concrete experience. Now I reflect on that experience. How'd that go? And then after that, I think, well, what could I have done differently? You know? And then you iterate and you do it again. It's a constant loop. Have a concrete experience, reflect on it, maybe evaluate it, try something new, experiment with that something new, go through it again. Kolb's experiential learning cycle. That is the foundation of everything that we do. And that's how you build a skill. So yeah, you have to be able to reflect on these things. And if you can't, it's okay to also have a friend, find a friend that's going to be brutally honest, or go back to the recording. But once again, I really speak in absolutes either, but this is a rare time where I might. If you don't want to record yourself in an audible standpoint, in a video standpoint, you don't want to get feedback from a devil's advocate friend, from another coach, because coaches need coaches too. If you don't want to do this, you don't want to do that, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do that, but you can't figure out why your athletes won't improve and you want to know how to get them to improve, probably not as committed to coaching, or you're probably leading with ego defense mechanisms. And then you have to ask yourself, am I a true lifelong learner? This is how I poked at strength and conditioning. Oh, I'm a lifelong learner. Really, because it seems like you just want to learn the things you want to learn. Weight training, this, that. It doesn't seem like you want to learn interpersonal skills. And then once we started showing videos of FBI agents, firefighters, things like that come into our workshops, guess who started coming? More and more coaches. Because, these are the people they'd read books from.
Right.
And now they realize they're doing it. I'm not. So that is another tactic that we didn't talk about that I think can be really helpful, but can be perceived as dark. And of course, if you take it over the line, everything starts with somebody's self-concept and self-image. If you target the self-concept, generally you're going to have a great framing device. So, hey, Tommy, I know you love learning. You love feedback. You've talked to me about that a lot. I have some feedback for you. Can we talk? Is there a time where we can chat about it? Or even one of my friends who dodged our workshop for a long time. I'm like, hey, Jim, how you doing? Yeah, listen, I know every year you do this big post, and I just saw it of all the things you're going to challenge yourself. You ready to do our stuff yet? Or is this a year you keep hiding? And I'm smiling, and he knows it's that kind of relationship. Right. Then eventually he was like, all right, you got me. It's time to get uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So that's the fun, man. That's playing in the gray.
Yeah. That's where I think the, not shaming, but the playful banter jab.
Yeah.
For example, one of my go-tos is if a kid overreacts or to a miss, a failure, a mistake, you get the body language like, oh.
Yeah.
Then I'd be like, dude, are you in drama? You are a natural at this, man.
Beautiful.
Tell me when your play is. And like, I'm joking around. We're having a good time.
No, you're giving a hard time.
But then helping them realize like, okay, like the ball's still in the play.
Yeah. Let's get moving. Yeah. Like that. It's 3-act structure in movies and story and life. Act 1 is usually like, okay, you get to know the character. Here's my life. Things are going well. Act 2, world blows up. Conflict. Now we're confronted with the lie the character believes. William Wallace thought that if he kept his head down, the war with England wouldn't come to him. It did, or every actor in every movie thinks if I just do this, everything's great. Then their world blows up. Now it's like, you going to answer the call? Act 2 is about answering the call or refusal of the call. John Wick loves to refuse the call. I'm retired. The dog getting killed is the normal world blowing up, not refusing the call anymore, going into the new world. Now he meets the trials, tribulations. Now we have the ability to learn. But if you refuse the call, you don't want feedback, you don't want conflict, inner or external, you're not going to learn, you're not going to change. Name me a movie that you love watching where the character doesn't change or doesn't learn, and you're like, man, what a great movie. That's called a negative character arc or a neutral character arc. Those are boring movies.
I can't even think of an example.
Yeah. You don't want to. It's probably like, it's not even like A Fish Called Wanda with Jamie Lee Curtis. That doesn't have Michael Myers. He doesn't really change in Halloween. He just keeps coming after, but like, and he only goes after family members. Although I think he makes a rare occasion of diversifying his kills. But really, Michael Myers represents this indomitable, like the character he goes after has to change. Jamie Lee Curtis has to fight fire with fire and embrace her dark side in a situational sense to overcome that faceless, nameless evil.
That makes sense to me from the previews. I've never actually seen it.
You've never seen the movie Halloween?
It's not for me.
Haddonfield, Illinois means nothing to you.
No.
What is it with you and not seeing or what are you repressing?
I just watch Tom Cruise movies and Twister.
But watch the original Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael Myers. I'm not a slasher guy, and admittedly I love Halloween, but I'm not like a slasher guy. I didn't really do Freddy Krueger or Jason or Chucky or any of that stuff. But Michael Myers, there's something. I mean, here's how I liken it. Nebraska in the 90s was just a powerhouse team that had 5 plays, and they ran at you, and they kept coming, and they kept coming. And I'm a boxer that loves gut punches. You hunt for the head all you want. I'm going to keep hitting your ribs and your liver, and I'm going to take the soul out of you. Michael Myers represents that. They wanted a killer that basically has one purpose. He will not stop. There's no words, no witty phrases. It's an expressionless mask that's actually trivia for you, modeled after the face of William Shatner. You're welcome. And literally, no matter how many 2x4s of the head or anything he takes, he'll like lay down, and then he just sits straight up. That's where the Undertaker got it. So Michael Myers, Haddonfield, Illinois, Halloween 1. Phew. You don't know coaching unless you know that. I want 3 coaching lessons that you take from the original Halloween.
Now I have to watch it.
Yeah,
it is the season.
Yeah, and great music, by the way. I like to in my last neighborhood,
like write and do focus work to it.
Well, I mean, I did. We used to live in a neighborhood where we had all these neighbors. We were really secluded. We were at the end of the cul-de-sac where everybody would walk. So last Halloween, I get really into it. I put on a Michael Myers mask, and I put out a sign that said, I'm in training, and people would walk by and see me in the Michael Myers mask doing curls and overhead presses.
That's funny.
Yeah,
that's good.
And we played the theme music, and I just played on a loop with a fog machine. I'm married.
All right. We're moving to a segment now. This is Captain's Corner, so we're speaking now to that 14, 16, 18, 22-year-old.
I shouldn't speak to 14 and 16-year-olds.
Well, you're leading the team.
Okay, I'm leading the team. Coach's Corner.
Right. And now emphasize on becoming a self-leader.
Oh.
So they feel, right? They feel like the coach is against them. They feel at home they can't get the support. Maybe it's there with teammates, maybe it's not.
Adversity drive.
But they feel within them that there's something special to them. So speak now to how do you not listen to the external, but then pour gasoline on the internal.
But what's the external in this case? That people are telling them what?
It could be coach is not supportive.
Okay, so they feel like it's them against the world.
Yeah.
Oh, that's me. One, there is no leadership without self-leadership, right? It starts with that. Understanding that change your relationship with conflict. You are not your khakis, all these things, right? You need to understand that all conflict is normal. It's a catalyst. It's a strange, dark medicine that if you take it, tastes bitter, but really good. So this is me. I mean, I've been an underdog my whole life. This is one of the archetypes we talk about in my book, Conscious Coaching. The first thing you have to do is recognize the biggest mistake that underdog archetypes can make is they will have such an indomitable, I'll show you, chip on my shoulder. That is only sustainable to a point too, because that is the more is better. I'm going to keep coming. I see a lot of athletes like that wear themselves down, eventually get overuse injuries, all that kind of stuff. So you got to know when to dial it up and realize there's a key phrase here. Being the type of person that will run through a brick wall ceases to be an asset when not everything is a brick wall for you to run through. You can't treat everything like what I call, and this was a huge downfall of myself, everything was an 8 Mile moment. That if I didn't go rock the shelter, don't tell me you haven't seen 8 Mile.
Of course.
Yeah. So what I would do is, I had this mentality that like everything is my shot and it's my last chance and it's my one opportunity. But then here's the thing. The opportunities kept coming. And like when you get yourself built up and you just get into the sympathetic nervous system and you get so hyped, the crashes start taking their toll because you keep thinking, I proved everything. Okay, I didn't do enough. Now I'll work harder. Now I did this. You build everything up. And there is such a thing as like this emotional toll that you just can't keep recovering from. It's like doing the hardest workout in the world again and again and again. And then here was the lesson, right? So like I'd get ready to box and I would listen to, like, before my matches, It's Dark and Hell is Hot by DMX and all these other songs. And it was a professional fighter that used to spar with us to teach us, David Medina, that was like, "What are you doing?" I'm doing double unders, listening to music, getting hyped. And he's like, "I sleep before a fight. I rest. I play calming music." And I'm like, "Well, don't you go in there?" And he's like, "No, I want to be strategic. I want to be thoughtful. I want to be in that moment." And there's a difference between meeting the moment, being in the moment, and just obsessing about it. And that's what I realized I was doing is I was letting one thing define me over and over again. And then talk about shame and beating yourself up. Then what would happen is I'd always feel like I did my part and then some, but what the hell? Now I'm not getting the opportunities that I want or the respect that I want or whatever. Okay, now I must not be. It was just like a never ending process.
Mm-hmm.
So then I just kind of realized there is truth to when people are like, yeah, man, it kind of comes when you quit, getting so hyped up about it. Like, and sometimes you just can't rush things, and also the last thing I did too, that was a step is I was making it up that I almost like wasn't getting the respect that I was due. I was making it up that I wasn't accomplishing what I wanted to. If I really looked around, I was absolutely making gains in those things where I was getting opportunity. And the same thing happened with my book, Conscious Coaching. 99% of people were happy, loved it, supported the book, still do. Sorry, I think I spit something at you. Maybe it was a little bit of a chestnut.
You're just
But
hiding back here.
yeah, but one negative person I would turn into like 1,000 detractors. And so when I stopped and really realized it, I'm like, man, I'm making these things out to be things that they're not. These are opportunities. I need to make sure I take this in stride and I don't want to burn myself out. Because that's what I started noticing was going on around me and even within me is motivation and passion, if not properly managed, turns into burnout. So what I want to ask or tell people is know the difference between harmonious passion and obsessive passion.
Mm-hmm.
Obsessive passion is a fast track to burnout. And that's, do you control the activity or your thoughts, or do they control you? So an obsessive passion, the activity controls you. The thoughts control you. The stigma controls you. I'm not good enough. I got to work harder. I'm going to get it. I'm going to overcome it. Harmonious passion, you control the thoughts. You control the activity. So treat it like treat it like your stereo. Sometimes you turn the bass up, the volume up, and the treble. Some songs are better with the treble, higher, the bass down, whatever. But you've got to modulate it. You've got to treat it for the long term. And you also need to reassess what are the true needle mover moments, and then store up your energy for that. But every day can't be the Super Bowl. Every day can't be the 8 Mile moment. And if you're making it that, you might realize that you're really doing that because maybe you're not as motivated to do this thing as you thought. Maybe it doesn't mean as much as you thought. Maybe you're not as clear on your values because you can't give it all. I think the soundbite was just very clearly, not everything's a brick wall to run through. How are you defining yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the realistic kind of expectations you're putting on yourself? Because you're your own worst enemy, not everybody else.
Yeah. It's also important for a leader to understand that people need you. And when you internalize that so much, there's other teammates that they need you to step up in moments.
Yeah. And
so you're holding yourself back a little bit.
Exactly. And one thing that helped my friend Matt, I think he was never the same when I told him this. He puts a lot of high expectations on himself and he beats himself up. And I go, Matt, self-destruction is self-obsession. And he said, what'd you just say? And I go, self-destruction is self-obsession. You're always saying you didn't do this good enough and you need to do this better and you need to push harder and whatever. You're beating yourself up and really you're just obsessing. You're not the only one involved in this process. And I think this goes into what you just said. Leadership is not about one person and their actions and their traits and their behavior. It's a process shared up and down the chain. It's dynamic. Everybody's involved in it. It's not all about you. Your Herculean effort isn't responsible for this or that. Even the kicker, Nebraska's kicker, missed a field goal the other week against Illinois. They lost the game. It wouldn't have gone to overtime if he would have made the field goal. But then again, he wouldn't have had to make the field goal if somebody else would have converted the second down. And it goes on and on. So it's complexity. It's networked. Oh, we got a bad economy. Who's responsible? It's never one person. In complex adaptive systems, of which sport is an example, relationships are an example, economies of scale are an example, it never comes down to one person, one behavior, one moment. That's the lie.
And that's the lie to look out for. So that comes with a lot of self-awareness, and that's what we're here to aim to educate leaders and coaches and kids out there to step up. That it's not a lie; it's a lie you're telling yourself that you can overcome.
Yeah, and I mean, guys, I don't say this about things I don't mean it. You need to keep listening to content like this because there's so much crap out there on YouTube and in books and all this stuff. It really, you can blame everybody else. You can blame circumstances. You can try to live up to what we call this heroic blueprint. You can make it all about this stuff. Really, it just comes down to consistency, a sense of realism, adaptability, agency. Like, you just got to understand life's a shit show. Leadership's a shit show. You need the ups, the downs, and everything in between, and you need to be a whole person, and that's how you become more adaptable.
Boom. And where can people go to learn more?
Artofcoaching.com.
There we go.
Artofcoaching.com. And then my book, Conscious Coaching, which has been used by organizations like Microsoft and Apple, as well as sports teams, by the grace of God, is on Amazon. It's available internationally. And part of our proceeds go to the Alzheimer's Association and Leukemia Lymphoma Foundation. So it's Conscious Coaching for the book, artofcoaching.com for all of our courses, free resources, podcasts, and everything else.
Sweet.
Thank you for having me. Great job.
Thanks for hosting me in your beautiful home. Office here.
Brought to you by Sweat.
Yeah, it's getting hot in here.
Yeah, Nelly.
There you go.
Until next time.
All right.
This has been Captains and Coaches.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Your face.